Hey, everybody. What's that? All right, now we're doing for real this time. All right. Hey, everybody. Stand by one. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Kodiak Shack podcast. Today we have Kyle Gouge McAlpin. He is a C-17 pilot. He went to pilot training advanced, flew C-17, spent a little time teaching T-6s with Slayer, which we met him on the Det 24 podcast. And now he is flying C-17s and working at the MIT AI Accelerator. And so we're going to hear all about that from him. So Gouge, thank you for being here. Tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. So like you said, pilot training at Columbus. I did C-17s at Travis. And then I went over to called the Great Purge. So changed the crew ratio in the C-17 and got hit with that. Went over to advanced T-6s. Started up some of the spark cell action there with a couple other folks. So Slayer was one of them. Trigger Jordan, I think he's over at Morpheus now. And then based on some of the things we were doing there, I got picked up to help start this MIT AI Accelerator thing out in Boston. I fly C-17 still on the side here with McGuire, so that's where I'm at the Air Force Inns here at McGuire. Hopefully the internet holds up, and that's the basic background.
Nice. Well, that's right, because you told us before that you went to Columbus, because both Bender and I were Columbus guys. He was a FAPE there while I went through. And so the C-17 purge, you said, I don't know, maybe I've learned this and forgot it, but what was this all about?
Oh yeah, we just changed our crew ratio in the community. It's like the ratio of pilots to jets, and it was like just one change, and it changed how many pilots we were authorized to have, and so it was just like one assignment cycle where they took like a third of our squadron and PCS'd all of them out. So it's like a slaughter. It's wild.
And Bender and I, we've only done kind of the fighter thing. So the way it works there is like 18 PAA or 24 PAA, which it's like you're normally putting up like 8 or 10 or 12 jets at a time with those kind of numbers. So what was that number for the kind of, I don't know if it's PAA as well, or what was it? And then what did it change to and why?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number. I think it went from either 3.5 to 3 or 3 to 2.5. And basically we have like 12-ish jets at a base. And so that's typically 12 times 3-ish. So 36 crews authorized for the C-17. So it's 2 pilots and a loadmaster.
I gotcha. So, I mean, that's pretty much saying like you could theoretically, if you needed to, send every jet augmented crew and just go. And every jet that can fly takes off. I don't know if that's part of the doc statement, but is that something they think about?
That's a good question. I don't actually know. I've never been at headquarters. I have no idea how that calculation is made. Especially at the time, I was just a co-pilot, so I was just kind of subject to the kind of at the end of the whip. So,
well, and that's one thing we haven't really had in the podcast. And Bender, maybe you have questions about this as well. But what's the lifestyle like for we have some UPT hopeful stuff like that. What's the lifestyle in the C-17 world like?
Yeah, this is a question I get a lot. It's I always try to like shy away from it or couch it with a ton of nuance because it's really hard to say, and I really worry about like telling someone like this happened to me getting in the C-17 community. Some people would tell me they had been out like maybe 3 years prior to teaching me, and back a couple of years prior to me going through pilot training, it was this crazy model where you would TDY out to Ramstein for like 3 weeks and you just sit in Ramstein waiting for a mission, basically waiting for a jet. And you would get your mission and then you would go off and you would really have no idea when you were going to get a mission or if you were going to get a mission. Some people would just sit in the Ramstein hotel, the KMCC there for like 3 weeks and not get a mission and then just go home. But you were still gone, so you're still away from home, and you're just sitting in the KMCC for 3 weeks at a time. So it's really unpredictable, and a ton of traveling, even though you weren't necessarily doing that much flying, because you would just, maybe like gray tail or fly commercial out to Ramstein. So you're always gone, even though you maybe flying a little, maybe flying a lot. So now we've moved to you kind of take your own jet from home station and fly a mission with it model. And now our workload is really dependent on what's going on in the world. So the C-17s do everything. I tell people all the time, like we fly anything and everything that will fit in a C-17, which is like you can roll up a semi truck into the back of the jet, just drive a semi truck straight up into the back of the jet, which we do often. You can put military working dolphins in there. I think the C-17 was used to retire Free Willy, the whale, and I think we flew that whale
Nice.
to Greenland and retired the whale. We carry all sorts of crazy stuff. Anything you could fit in the aircraft, we carry, like nuclear weapons, all sorts of crazy stuff. So it's really hard to say what the workload is going to be at any given time. So I try to tell people like you can't really pick based on a workload in the C-17. It's really just depends on what's going on in the world. We do a lot of presidential support stuff. So if the president happens to be, or vice president happens to be traveling a lot, then we end up flying a lot. If there's happens to be a lull, seems like there's never lulls, but if there happens to be a lull, then we're not flying that much. But the variety of missions is really, really cool, and you can kind of get into like any mission you want in the C-17, which is super cool. We can talk about some of the cool mission sets we do.
Well, and that's one thing I was wondering about. And Bender, speak up if you do have a question. But I know when Bender and I would travel, because we traveled a lot in our time in Japan, we'd be like, come on, C-17, come on, C-17. And then a C-130 would land and be like, oh, shoot, and no offense to the C-130, but the downside of the C-130 is it just doesn't carry as much. And I don't think it flies as fast or as far. So there's just like it becomes much more complicated when you're like, we have one C-130 doing like 3 trips or one C-17. And so, yeah, I flew on what, at least from the fighter side, it's called the ESTA bird. So when you're moving jets around the world, you'll throw maintenance and a couple extra pilots and a couple extra parts and motors and stuff like that into a C-17. It just kind of follows the jets, which it's not the most comfortable place to sleep, at least in the back. But it's not a terrible spot, just hanging out back there and kind of cruising around the world that way. How does the C-17's at Travis, so obviously on the West Coast, and then Charleston is out on the East Coast, and I think those are the two kind of heavy hitters, right? Like McCord and McGuire and stuff are the other ones.
Yes.
Does it vary depending on base or East Coast, West Coast, on what kind of jobs you're doing and like low altitude drops, stuff like that?
Yeah, a little bit. So our two big bases are McCord and Charleston. Those are two we call mega bases. We used to have 4 squadrons at each. Now we have 3 squadrons at each for whatever reason. I think it was part of the crew ratio change. So those are our two mega bases. Every other base has 1 squadron, so we call them single squadron bases. So those are Travis, McGuire, Dover, Hickam. I missed one, I'm sure. And there's a bunch of a couple more Guard and Reserve bases kind of floating around there. And then we also have a NATO presence. So NATO owns 3 C-17s that are stationed at Papa, Hungary. But yeah, the mission sets are very different. So only about 25% of the crew force does airdrop. So the airdrop is primarily at McCord and Charleston, and then it's done a little bit at Hickam and maybe a little bit otherwise, kind of here and there. A little bit at Altus. Altus is our FTU. But then, so like McCord has some specialized mission. They have deep freeze where they fly to Antarctica. They resupply McMurdo Station. They call that Operation Deep Freeze. And basically, you land a C-17 on an ice runway in Antarctica and resupply the research station there, which is super cool. Super challenging weather, often in a challenging operation. But then we also have, so in addition to this, there's air land, which is like people who don't do airdrop. Then there's air drop. And then there's Special Operations Low Level. Everyone calls them Sol 2. And they have sort of a specialized mission set with doing, they do like low level air refueling and AMP-4 landings, AMP-4 lighting landings, which is like completely blacked out assault landings. So no infrared lights or any lights at all.
Yeah, I've heard the C-17 can move. Bender and I actually talked about previously. We were able to at different times, but I was able to get a chance to fight a C-17. They wanted to do like defense against a fighter, but they wanted to legitimately be at like, I don't know, 500 feet, 300 feet above the water. And I was like, no, like I can't do that. Like, so we had to simulate the ground because I would, the fighter airspeeds are faster, it seems, than the C-17. They were like, oh, no, we'll be at like 100 and some knots. And I was like, I won't, because I'll fall out of the sky. Bender, you got any C-17 questions?
Yeah, so I was going to ask. Well, Vader mostly asked, but so you said you were at Travis initially. Did you do Charleston after Travis, or just Travis
No, so I went from Travis, I went to Advanced Teaching
to Vance?
T6s. That was
Okay,
my
cool.
next space. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So, as far as Travis goes, did you? I know you would have spent some time in PACAF, but is that mostly so? PACAF, do they own any C-17s other than maybe Hickams, or how does that work with AMC? Do they divide up mobility assets like that? How's that set up?
Yeah, AMC is super interesting. I don't know to what extent other commands do this. I've been led to believe AMC is pretty unique in not giving up C-17s. They don't chop C-17s at all, so they keep all their C-17s. They don't even chop deployed C-17s, so we have our deployed bases in Qatar LED'd, and they don't chop those C-17s either, so they're not given to CENTCOM. They're still retained by AMC. They just stand up like a separate office called Theater Direct Delivery (TDD), which sort of like manages the deployed C-17s under TACC, which is Tanker Airlift Command and Control. I think the acronym wrong. It's the 618th AOC. So uh, yeah, it's an interesting model. And the idea is kind of what you're talking about with like the C-130. Like it takes C-130 3 legs to get somewhere, and it takes us 1 leg, if not. Like we can get anywhere on Earth pretty much in 1 leg if we air refuel. So they call in AMC C-17s are called strategic airlift, which means we can take a unit all the way across the Earth and airdrop them into wherever they need to go in 1 leg, like one duty day, basically 1 day. Whereas C-130s, that might take like 3 or 4 days to get all the way around the globe. So they call C-130s are like tactical airlift, they say. They just don't go very far. So they kind of stay intra-theater.
That's cool. And then, sorry, one more question, Vader. As far as joint, how much are you airlifting Army units and Marines and stuff like that? Do you do a lot of joint type operations, or is it mostly Air Force customers?
Yeah, it's pretty significantly joint. It's the customers are all over the place. We do a lot of even combined stuff. So we'll carry a lot of the missions that LUD or I did when I was at LUD deployed was we would go get like Mongolian army soldiers and bring them into Afghanistan, for example. So yeah, we do all the joint stuff. We do a lot of combined like international stuff, anything and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
What's the biggest weakness as far as the administrative of AMC? So, like, for instance, Vader and I are interested in like the mission planning part of uh, the CAF, right? Like it's pretty antiquated. It's all like Excel and PowerPoint, and I know AOS movements feel like they're incredibly antiquated. Like, why do I have 35 sheets of paper per packet? So what's AMC like? Is it pretty like a well-oiled technology machine, or is it like what are we doing here in 1985?
Yeah, yeah. I think you know the answer to that, but yeah, we're in the same boat. Our mission planning is pretty painful. So for us, all of our missions, sort of like commercial airline dispatch, all of our missions, most of our missions are centrally managed by TACC, which is the 618th AOC, and a lot of their stuff is pretty old and antiquated, and we travel to weird places too, like very very austere environments where there's no cell service, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no anything. So it could be a challenge to be centrally managed by an organization that you can't even call or text. So there's a lot of challenges there, and then um, we're finally sort of getting over that with some stuff like Mattermost, which is like a IL4, like a CUI chat app you can get on your phone. You can receive, we call it your flight package, which is like maybe 100 pages of your pre-flight materials, your flight plan, and the weather briefing, and all the stuff you need to go fly, your diplomatic clearances, and all that stuff. But yeah, I think that was so. Kabul was a big stress test of TACC, I think, to be honest, and there are a lot of really uncomfortable things. I think we recognized as part of that, which was we had got so used to just doing the same thing when we were in the desert, Iraq and Afghanistan primarily, and just these kind of like very predictable ops that when we surged into Kabul, we just weren't ready for it, and it really fell onto the aircraft, like individual aircraft commanders, to just make it happen. The support was sometimes lacking.
which it's kind of unfortunate that you would think that an aircraft commander and end operators would be used to flexing that muscle, but because it's not so much the centralized control, decentralized execution, it's a surprise when it's like, hey, just make it happen, and you're like, oh, okay, like I finally do what we actually say we do. That's pretty wild. It's unfortunate the circumstances and where it happened. The so when you're flying the C-17, I mean, what's that lifestyle like when you're going on a trip? Is that like a couple weeks long, or is that a couple days long? I assume it varies, but and you're sticking with the same crew.
Yeah, that's so kind of the model is C-17s. I'd say like the standard mission. There's a lot of weird missions. I don't know if you can see my air quotes there. The standard mission is basically wherever you are, you would go somewhere in the U.S. and pick up maybe like an Army unit, Marine unit, maybe a SEAL unit or something like that, and you would bring them somewhere, whether that's like Africa or Iraq and Afghanistan, where we were doing a lot of that stuff. Syria, maybe these days, probably like Poland. Just bring them somewhere and then come home. And so that entire profile might take 3 duty days, which if you're flying 24-hour duty days is like 5 calendar days. So you sleep 3 times in 5 days, which is kind of wild. But that's kind of like the standard mission profile, and that takes typically 5 calendar days. But then you can also do so for presidential support missions. A lot of times you're just doing like 3 weeks. So they don't want to say how when they can get you back, so they just kind of tell you like expect to be out for 3 weeks. So there's missions like that where we do a lot of staging, for example. So you might like go out to Guam and sit in Guam for 3 weeks, just kind of waiting for a mission to come through or for a tasking to come down. So it's kind of like the stage model. It's kind of like discrete missions, and there's stages and a few other types of things we do. So like Operation Deep Freeze, when we go down and resupply McMurdo Station, they do a stage out of Christchurch, New Zealand, actually, which is pretty cool. So you sit in Christchurch for a few weeks.
That's cool.
Well, and does that mean like when you come back, it kind of slows down? Because again, you're gone. So then when you come back, can you kind of chill out a little bit so you're not like working 10-hour days, 12-hour days when you get back to base?
That would be the dream. Yeah. Technically, we get post-mission crew rest. Do fighter guys have post-mission crew rest? I don't know if that's a thing.
I don't know. I don't think if I've had it, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. So basically, for every hour we're off station, for every 3 hours we're off station, we get 1 hour back. I sound like an idiot if that's wrong.
Don't worry, we say wrong things all the time.
Say everything wrong. Then no one will trust me. Perfect. Yeah. So basically, like for however long you're out, you get some amount of time back. And so for a standard mission, you might get like a day or two off. Unfortunately, sometimes that will arrive on like a weekend, and so the day that you get off to like recuperate is a Saturday, which you theoretically should have gotten off anyways. And we often don't get holidays and weekends off anyways, so
yeah,
it could be pretty painful. Yeah, I think ideally we would get time off, but I think in practice that doesn't always happen. Kind of depends on your job, like what your side job is. But
well, and I think that's one thing that in a fighter squadron, because scheduling and the DO and the squadron is trying to optimize all the iron that they can fly for training, and your schedule is sometimes worse and sometimes better, but you think real world movements, real world stuff, like you're trying to optimize all that stuff. So it's understandable why people may not get as much downtime as they probably deserve because of the real world requirements. Bender, any C-17 parting shots before we move into AI?
We'll just keep that open for future C-17 questions if I think of them. Yeah. So always open.
It's good. Boom. Yeah. So now Gouge is at the MIT AI Accelerator. So kind of talk about how that got created and then what that means, not only at MIT, but for the military in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of timeline is basically in the middle of 2019, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force and his staff came to MIT, and we're kind of looking at the defense innovation ecosystem and said, if we're really going to get after AI, then we need to be partnering with universities, because that's where a lot of the most important AI research is happening, AI innovation. And so they jointly created this program at MIT, basically a partnership between MIT and the Air Force, where we give MIT money to do fundamental research in AI, and then we also give them active duty personnel that can kind of represent the Air Force mission sets to the researchers. And so basically 1 January 2020 was the start of the AI Accelerator. We have this partnership called a cooperative agreement, where MIT does the research for us, and then we give them we pay for the research. We also give them active duty folks. So I'm a pilot. We have cyber operators, intelligence, weather, um, 62, so engineers, acquisitions. We get a really broad spectrum, representative spectrum of the Air Force. We get officers enlisted to represent sort of like the Air Force mission sets to the MIT folks that are doing the research. And then so MIT basically does the basic research on the one hand, which is very fundamental. So it's not necessarily, you'd look at it and it's like academic research papers, maybe not necessarily super applicable to like directly to the Air Force mission. But then MIT Lincoln Laboratory, which is a federally funded research and development center, so kind of similar to a national lab, if you've heard of that, they can take that stuff and actually use the technology or the research that MIT is doing to turn that into a prototype for something that the actual Air Force end users can use or try out. And so that's kind of the model, the entire all the way through that kind of pipeline. The permanent party airmen are kind of guiding and providing the Air Force perspective. That's kind of the high level model.
When there was a period of time talking to Paco Benitez from the Merge newsletter and the Merge podcast. He's a smart dude, and he said there was a period of time a long time ago where the DoD, the government spending, was kind of the place for the leading edge, most advanced, like most fun, exciting tech. But we're not the biggest checkbook anymore. We're not the biggest organization. We're not the most advanced one. So this is kind of leveraging today. It's Silicon Valley and it's MIT, it's places like that, Purdue, that are generating these ideas, generating this tech. So now we're going to leverage that to still help us gain the benefit of that technology. Is that pretty much?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I was going to throw in next was the way we think about it is kind of like we used to have a really, really tight relationship with academia pre-Vietnam. I think that kind of atrophied during Vietnam, a little bit of tension there, but we're really trying to build back the relationship that we had. Academia is, I think industry and academia are really the two great strengths of the United States. And there's been a little bit of tension. I don't know if you heard in the news, like the Project Maven stuff that happened where Google is working on this project called Project Maven. And some of the folks at Google that were working on Project Maven were alleged to have disagreed. They didn't want to work basically on like a defense project, and it caused this big firestorm in the news that Google didn't want to work with the DoD, and it was this big backlash. And I think realistically, what happened is there were a few folks at Google that were Chinese citizens that didn't want to work on United States government defense research, and everyone else was pretty happy and pretty excited to be doing things that made the DoD better. And it got blown up into this huge narrative and created a bunch of skepticism. And so it's really cool for us to be here in person and to just show our faces, and like we are not crazy baby killers, we're just normal people providing hopefully a valuable service to society. And we don't want Arnold Schwarzenegger to go around killing people as a superhuman, so any more than you do. So like we are here with the same intentions. We don't want killer robots. We don't want any of this to get out of hand either. So.
When you have a technical background, so for people listening to the podcast that are kind of interested in, maybe the MIT Accelerator or one of the other programs, so you have a technical background that you're kind of leveraging, and other people in the organization do the same?
Yeah, that's right. So all of us have some sort of technical background, I'd say, kind of varying levels. Like some of us, there's a couple of our folks have PhDs in AI ML. My background is computer engineering, so my bachelor's in computer engineering, and then I did a lot of tech stuff through like the innovation sphere, so starting the Spark Cell and working a lot in technology kind of acquisition in the advanced Spark Cell. So those two things together. But yeah, a lot of technical background. But I think it's important, like I try to tell people, it's not magic. This is something you can learn about. You can just take a simple free course online. We offer some education, can recommend some education. You can pick up, there's a couple of really good books now on AI ML you can pick up. There's all sorts of ways to get smarter on it. It's not magic. It's totally accessible, and we all, if you're in the Air Force, you are more than capable enough to learn about this stuff and use it in your day-to-day job.
Well, and that's I mean, that's one thing I didn't understand before I got into the military, how many things were there. Bender and I, when a long time ago, he was looking at the Olmsted, which is kind of a language immersion. You get to move to a country, and then there's, the Stanford Ignite, and then there's, Shift is putting on the Defense Ventures Fellows stuff. There, we talked to a gentleman. We actually just released the other day a podcast of Ian, who was a presidential scholar. All these things are what people in the military are able and eligible to do just to make themselves smarter and really more marketable in the Air Force and out of the Air Force at some point. So I think there's a ton there. And so now, if you could explain in generic terms or as in-depth as you'd like, beginning to end, like how would something start in an MIT AI Accelerator, and how would it kind of progress through those levels to end users utilizing that tech?
Yeah, absolutely. So the disclaimer here is we've only been around for 3 years now. We haven't fully figured out a lot of this stuff, so we're kind of building the airplane as we fall. I think there's some really cool successes so far, or really close to some big successes that we're excited about. But basically the model would be, so MIT does the basic research, the fundamental research, that's like the mathematical equations and like the math behind the machine learning algorithms, which is a really exciting area of research. And then MIT Lincoln Laboratory, other national labs, SBIR, sort of like contract partner companies could take in and operationalize that. So prototype and develop that technology towards an end user. And then eventually we hope that and the hard part, as it seems like it's a problem for everybody, is getting sustainment. So how do we transition this to some sort of program office? But basically, one thing we're doing, for example, is magnetic navigation. It's a project I work on. So basically, a few years ago, they decided, there's some researchers at MIT that decided that we probably now have the mathematical sort of chops to do magnetic navigation on the edge, basically like on a laptop on a plane that's actively flying, and in real time calculate a magnetic navigation solution, which the theory was possible before, but it probably needed a supercomputer before. So they developed sort of the math underpinning that idea. And then basically like Lincoln Laboratory takes that idea and actually applies it to a real airplane. And so that's what I'm doing next week, going out to fly magnetic navigation on the C-17, and hopefully collect the data we need to train an ML model to actually navigate using the Earth's magnetic field. So that's kind of the...
Now, sorry to interrupt, but because I'm a caveman, when I hear magnetic navigation, I think of a whiskey compass that we've had since, some of the first airplanes. So how does the current magnetic navigation, how is it different than just like a compass that is magnified or magnetized?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is, honestly. Like compass navigation is just a cruder version of what we're doing. So you're using a compass to kind of point you in the direction of the field lines, which sort of indicates where magnetic north is. So if you think about what you're doing, have you heard of like lines of magnetic declination, of isogonic lines, like the lines of equal magnetic variation?
Okay, yeah. So almost like latitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, Bender and I have. But no, I imagine much like latitudinal lines, like as you move relative either north or south of the equator or east or west of the prime meridian, you have a very deliberate line that you cross every time, kind of thing. Like a
and
I'll let you explain
no,
it.
That's pretty close. And all there really are is like, so they're lines of magnetic deviation. So it's basically like you're looking at a picture of the Earth's magnetism, like the Earth's magnetic field, and that's what the isogonic lines, the magnetic declination charts are. So if you're on the east coast of the U.S., I think it's something like 16 east-ish, right? And so if you're going to navigate using compass, you have to use that number to correct from magnetic north to true north. Well, those numbers are just sort of like crude indications of what the Earth's magnetic field is doing. In real life, the Earth's magnetic field is way more detailed than that. And it's so detailed, actually, that if you have a really high quality magnetic readings, like the strength of the magnetic field, which a compass doesn't tell you, but they're pretty simple sensors, you probably have one on your phone, I would assume, that could tell you that. If you have a really detailed reading, and you have reading over time, then you could tell where you are based on a really high quality magnetometer reading. And the idea would be, for example, like a really simple way to visualize this would be like if there's a big iron deposit in the Earth's crust, then you can kind of sense that. And if you have a map of where that iron deposit is in the Earth's crust, and you can sense it with a magnetometer, then you kind of know where you are. For example, it's more complicated than that, but it's kind of the intuition.
So now, as you're saying, this is all happening on the edge. So for everybody who hasn't kind of heard about, we've talked about it in previous podcasts, but edge computing, pretty much it's the end user. So you're not connected to the cloud or GPS or anything. So this is your GPS denied. Maybe you have no connectivity outside of your airplane. You are able to navigate, and not just navigate, but navigate accurately rather than just using like an internal navigation unit like an INU like most planes have or something?
Yeah, that's right. So it would complement an inertial navigation unit or inertial reference system. So just like GPS complements your inertial reference system, really it just like helps constrain your inertial navigation solution. Magnetic navigation would do the exact same thing. So it would just be an alternate update source to your inertial reference system, just like GPS is one reference source. And so basically, I think in my mind, like sometimes we get a little fixated on some of the specific navigation technologies that update the inertial reference system. But the important thing is there's a few others, but the other ones have been around forever. Celestial navigation, just get the stars. Visual navigation is like what we do with our eyeballs, and then you could point a camera at the ground to do the same thing, kind of automatically. The other one is signals of opportunity, so like triangulating radio stations kind of thing, which a lot of jets do. You really need all of those. I mean, there is no reason that we should be subject to GPS denial. It just is not necessary. We have plenty of different diversified ways of navigating that can all update one inertial reference system. So magnetic navigation is one of those. It happens to have a lot of pros that make it really useful. And for example, like Indo-Pacific, for example, you don't need to see the ground. So in the Pacific, you can't see the ground, right? Because it's water. So visual navigation doesn't really help you. And that's assuming that you're not even in a cloud, right? And also, if you're over land and you're in a cloud, you still can't see the ground, so that doesn't really help that much. If you're in a cloud, you can't see the stars, so celestial navigation is out, right? And the last thing that's pretty cool about magnetic navigation, it's really hard to jam for various reasons. So yeah, completely self-contained, internal to the aircraft, difficult to jam. It has pretty useful qualities for the Indo-Pacific.
So
nice.
How accurate are we talking? Like, is it to update an INS or whatever for an aircraft? Like, are we talking weapons quality potentially? Like, instead of GPS guided bombs, you could potentially do a bomb with an INS, obviously, that updates with magnetic. Or does it take too long for that kind of a solution to be built? What are you laughing at, Vader? Did I cross?
That's a good question.
Classification line?
No, I just think it's. I think it's interesting because you're like, hey, like, what else can we guide or navigate from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, really, like your core point is like, is the net, which I think you should definitely be asking. Everyone should be asking is like, is this operationally relevant? And that's exactly the question we're trying to answer. Our initial suspicion, I think we have good reason to believe the answer is yes. So, for example, there's a paper that Major Aaron Canciani was kind of one of the fathers of this in the Air Force. He published a paper. We did this on an F-16, and they got down. I mean, they're still like using new and newer techniques to navigate in post-analysis. But some of the results show, like 100-meter-ish accuracy, sub 100-meter accuracy for navigating on the F-16. It's like an operational platform using magnetic navigation.
And then, so how would this work? So now we have in instrument landing system, ILS, and we have TACANs, and we have all these VORs and all these types of approaches. We have RNAV, like GPS types of approaches. So we're saying we're GPS denied. We can roll in and using the assumption or the goal of this is we're going to keep a good enough system that it's going to keep us legal to get to a location and fly to points and land from those. Like, that's kind of what we're expecting with it, minus GPS.
Yeah, for like operational use case, I think that would be the way that I would explain it for an operational vignette. So I would say like the Indo-Pacific is really tough, tyranny of distance. I mean, you have maybe 8 hours between islands in the Pacific. If your GPS drifts, I don't know, whatever, even 100 meters, 1,000 meters, a couple thousand meters per hour, uh, that can be really problematic if you're in the weather and you don't actually see your destination airfield. Like actually trying to find the airfield, that could be really problematic, right? Or get on the ILS beam or get on an instrument approach. Just like localizing that island at all can be challenging. So if you can constrain your navigation solution down to even sub like 1,000 yards, 1,000 meters, that can be really useful. I think in the Indo-Pacific fight, I have to kind of work through some of those operational vignettes based on what we discover in some of this testing. We're really like a lot of stuff just no one knows. Yeah, I mean these are all the questions we're trying to answer. Trying to advance the technology readiness level. I think we talked about before, but from like basically technology readiness level 1 is like basic idea to like 9 is like flight proven on many flights. So just trying to advance from a crude idea into how is this operationally useful.
And this is, like you said, it's laptop size.
Yeah, we think that we can do it on a laptop. That again has yet to be demonstrated, but we think it should be possible.
That's pretty sick. So does your shop, or who designs like the system process, like the test, map, if that makes sense? Like where are the milestones you're trying to achieve? Like what's the direction the research goes, and then the prototyping stuff? Is that you guys, or is that MIT kind of that does that? Or
yeah, so it's really interesting. It's a really interesting joint partnership where MIT has their incentives basically are to do really hard research. So they want to do really hard things, and they've told us before on certain projects we propose, like that's not hard enough, we're not doing it. That's too simple. Have someone else do it, which is awesome. You love to hear that. So their sort of goals are to do something really hard and to do it at the basic, like fundamental research level. So basic, like public things they can publish on. And then our goals obviously are to operationalize something, to get something like useful to the actual users. So the way that the partnership works is kind of that pipeline I was talking about. So like MIT to Lincoln Lab, and Lincoln Lab could do the prototyping to us. And then hopefully, so I don't know if I mentioned this before, but hopefully at some point we get a company to pick it up. And so we recently kind of partnered with a SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Company. One of our big successes that we talk about is this company, Sandbox AQ, kind of spun off. They participated in one of our open challenges and spun off to actually do this for the government. So as far as I know, maybe there's others, but they're the first one I've heard of that wants to do specifically magnetic navigation for the U.S. government. So
that's the cool thing about those cyber companies. Two things. One, a lot of them are highly motivated, smart people working on a lot of cool stuff. But then they're not these behemoth of companies that it's super difficult for them to kind of shift gears or work on new projects. So they're easily able to say like, oh yeah, we can try our hand at that, because again, it's a small bet, it's a test. Worst case, it just doesn't work out, and then you move on. But it's cool that that's happening. So what would you say prior to the MIT AI Accelerator, was there something that's similar to it, or is this like something that didn't really exist after we kind of lost that academic connection? And then two, like going forward, where do you see the AI Accelerator kind of fitting in larger airspace wise?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if there was something similar in the recent past. My kind of intuition is no. There has been plenty of basic research. Basic and fundamental research are done, and the government funds a lot of it. AFRL does it too, and they do a great job at it. I think the difference with what we're doing is we are putting the operators in very close partnership with the people actually doing the research and development and prototyping. And I think that has produced some really special sort of results, for example, in the magnetic navigation project, like steering projects towards things that are really useful to end users and to the Air Force.
One thing I've seen is, everybody's obviously interested in participating and helping out where they can. But like you said, you're gone for anywhere from a couple days to 3 weeks, and then you get home and you're doing laundry and all that kind of stuff and trying to get ready for the next thing. And then it's like, hey, also just help out this company when they have random questions. And it's like, yeah, you want to, but the reality is that's not very feasible. So I have heard companies are always very nice when they say it, because they don't want to be jerks, because they're not jerks, but they they could definitely use more end user feedback. So having dedicated end users who are always there, always prepared to provide input, because I'm not an engineer. I don't develop these things, and I never will be able to. But they also don't have the insights that I do, just having flown aircraft. So it is good that you have people who really understand the problem set, providing that input and feedback to those engineers. So in that iterative process, it is baked in, rather than 6-month milestone. How did we do? Terribly. So that's good that's kind of a part of the process.
Yeah, and I'd say maybe the other really cool point of this is MIT is an awesome, world-class university, of course, but they're just one university, and we have a lot of these incredible universities in the United States, again, like one of our great national strengths. And so one of the things we're doing to sort of like multiply the scale, hopefully, is each project. So we have, I think, 13 right now, research projects. Each project actually has to release an open challenge, so like an open data set. And this is something that for those of us in the government, maybe that observe the government, is not a normal thing for the Department of Defense to do, to publicly release our information. So that this contract basically funds public data set being released for each project, and that data set basically serves, in my opinion, from my sort of like vantage point as the govy on the team, it serves to sort of steer academia and industry towards our problems. Right. So like machine learning, everyone in machine learning wants to publish on like a unique and hard data set. And this is where machine learning has really gotten its historical advancements from. It's like these really big open public data sets that people can kind of just crunch away on and try different things on and compete on solving or building solutions towards. So what we're doing is each project is releasing an Air Force relevant data set that academia, really just completely public, academia industry can download and work on. So it's kind of cool that I think it's steering everyone in the direction of our problems, which is really powerful, and like expanding scope and scale of what we're doing beyond just the 12 of us and the handful of researchers that work with us at MIT.
Well, and it advises them of the problems, because we didn't understand the problems that we now know because we weren't in the inner circle or in the industry, but now we understand them. So being able to publish these things, letting people know who may already have a solution that we didn't even know it existed. Bender, what question do you have?
Struggle bus. You have a 12-man shop. Are they all operators? Who makes up that accelerator lab?
Yeah. So they're from all over the place. So I'm C-17 pilot. We had just PCS'd an MQ-9 pilot. We have another C-17 pilot, Eric Robinson. We have an intelligence officer, weather officer. We have acquisitions, cyber. What else? We have imagery analysts for a long time. Did some really cool work on SAR to EO, synthetic aperture radar to electro-optical, kind of automatic conversion. People from all over the Air Force. And mostly kind of...
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, they all computer, because you said you were a computer engineering background. Are they the similar type backgrounds academically?
Mostly kind of computer engineering, computer science at various levels. So some, for example, didn't get that for bachelor's, but did it for master's. Kind of that general field.
Any geography majors? Maybe poli-sci majors?
Not yet. I don't think so.
Asking for a friend. Yeah.
We certainly could. I mean, it's more about, like, as you know, with a lot of this stuff, it's more about like finding the right person and the cultural fit than it is. The person who's like really motivated to work with you is going to figure out a way to learn what they need to learn. So I think it's less about the specific background than it is about the interest and passion.
And if someone were interested in, either MIT, the AI Accelerator, or one of the other programs, like how did you find out about it? And then how would you recommend people kind of shop around and look for ways to kind of get involved and engage?
Yeah, so I found out about it so I had started the Vance Spark Cell with Trigger Jordan, that Morpheus guy I was mentioning. And so I was in the AFWorks circles, and when they started this thing up, they were looking for people with sort of the AFWorks kind of like innovation mindset, I think. And I just happened to be right place, right time. I think wanted someone to represent the pilot community and someone with a little bit of a technical background, so a technical degree and innovation experience. So just right place, right time for the first time in my life. So that's how I found it. But now we've got a lot of ways to engage with this. So the Phantom Fellowship is one. So we take about like 10 people every few months in and have them help sort of learn about our projects, learn about AI. We put them through some sort of like CBT, curated CBT training on AI. So like the Coursera style, like MOOC training on AI ML. And then they come out 3 times for 3 weeks out to the AI Accelerator in Boston and Cambridge and help do the research in the project. So kind of learn what we're doing and what the MIT researchers are thinking about, how they think. So that's one way, Phantom Fellowship. Another way is all of our research projects produce these open challenges. So if you're interested, you can just download one of our data sets and work on it. Some of them are like discrete challenges with a stop-start. You can just sign up and work through this challenge, and you'll kind of get to engage with the machine learning researchers that have worked on it, the operators that have helped build the project data set. That's another way.
Well, awesome. The Bender, what I got to run in a minute. So what one last question you got before we let Gouge get out of here?
What if we have good ideas? Well, what if we have ideas that we think are good? What if I want to challenge MIT and be like, you want a hard problem set? Like, here you go. And then they can tell me like, that's dumb. But what kind of, like, where are you guys getting your ideas, I guess is my question.
Yeah. So that was a really interesting, basically negotiation. Like I said, like Air Force has a point of view and MIT has a point of view, and finding that like overlap in the Venn diagrams is actually a really interesting part of the relationship. So the way we started was the Air Force provided like 6 high-level sort of areas we were interested in. One of them, for example, is like humanitarian assistance and disaster response. Was another one. I think one of them was alternative navigations. That's where magnetic navigation came from. And so we basically gave them these like high-level things we were interested in, and they came back to us with a bunch of proposals. So I think it was 150 or so research proposals. And from there, it became like a negotiation for like a back and forth kind of discussion on what things were most mutually advantageous to both MIT and the Air Force. Like what things were most interesting to MIT, most groundbreaking and hardest, and then to the Air Force, what things were most useful and most likely to actually deliver something to an end user. So that was kind of the selection process. And we're going through right now kind of discussions on like what does the next phase look like, and it's probably too early to say, but we're hoping to scale. I think this has proven some really great value, and we're hoping to scale a little bit bigger and take on some new projects potentially, maybe expand the scope to incorporate industry in addition to academia.
Well, I know Bender and I are kind of a bad example because we've kind of spent more time in the innovation side than most, but we know a lot of people in the military, out of the military, that are looking to tackle difficult problems. So I guarantee there's plenty more people out there trying to help out in ways they can. Gouge, how would you say if somebody wanted to reach out and either MIT AI Accelerator, all that stuff, how would you want them to reach out?
Yeah, a couple ways. So our website is, we post all of our stuff on our website. So there's 2 of them. One is aia.mit.edu. The other Air Force one is aiaccelerator.af.mil. And then I'm on LinkedIn. Give you the username later, post it in the show notes maybe, and just my MIT email is just k.mcalpin@mit.edu. So first initial last name at mit.edu.
Nice. Well, Bender, anything before we get out of here?
No, thanks for coming out, guys. That was awesome. We always do this week. We have a good intro for an hour, and then we have about 1,000 more questions that we actually want to ask. Right. So that's probably what will happen after we're done recording.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, for the audience, because I forget the admin almost every time, thank you for listening. Please give us 5 stars and share to all the friends that aren't already listening to the Kodiak Shack podcast. Let them know that we're out here and that you're listening to us. And donations are always open. Thank you to our Adamus Cyber, who was one of our previous sponsors. Sponsors are always open as well. So feel free to reach out at info@kodiakshack.com. codyextract.com if you would like to sponsor some episodes as well. Gouge, thanks again for being here. See ya.